Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to On the Bright Line podcast, tales from recovering food addicts from the perspective of a physician, a therapist, and an off-the-wall storyteller. We are not affiliated or endorsed by Brightline Eating, and all content presented in this podcast represents our personal opinions and does not represent medical, nutritional, or psychological professional advice. On today's episode, we are going to talk about how not to be annoying. We're not sure we're going to be able to do it.
We all struggle with that.
So this is a topic that we talk about pretty regularly amongst us because one can become a little bit of a fanatic when one finds BLE and decides that it's the answer to their weight struggles. And so jokingly for the last 6 months or so, it's like the only thing that we talk about when we're together, right? Obviously we do a podcast on this. We do a lot of talking, but the thought really is, and the reason why we want to do this episode is because it's really easy to decide that everybody needs to know about BLE.
That you want to get everybody to drink the
Kool-Aid.
BLE Kool-Aid.
Exactly. Yeah. The
sugar-free, BLE compliant Kool-Aid.
The hard thing is to rein that in and be supportive and understanding when people are not in the place to hear about this yet. And so I want to just start and talk about when Bonny first told me about BLE. And that was, she was, I think, through your weight loss journey and into maintenance at that point, maybe during your weight loss journey.
I'm sure I told you about it early on.
Yeah,
right?
maybe. It was kind of also COVID-y times. And I know that we weren't
seeing
seeing each other
we
weren't seeing each other in person as much. But I just remember the first time she told me, I was like, no. I was like, no way.
Hard no.
No, yes. Not even just like I'll think about it. It was like, no. I could never do that. That's what I said. I said I could never do that. It's way too restrictive. And I mean, we've talked about this on previous episodes. I thought, this is just another fad that Bonny's doing. I mean, honestly, I remember the juicing. I remember the so I'm like, it'll fade. Like she'll get off the
BLE
wagon at some point and it'll be something else. And so I think, for me at that point, I wasn't ready to hear.
Guys, I juiced for 6 months. Yeah. All I consumed was juice.
Crazy.
Oh my God.
It was really,
and it was really gross. I got really tired of the green stuff.
So anyway, that's it feels like
and I tried to get everyone else to do it.
Yeah, she did try and get everybody else to do it. So I just, I want to say, I don't feel like you were that pushy. I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, they were so pushy. But I can also now, sitting on this side of the equation, see where you probably felt like I feel when you see somebody that you're like, you could benefit from this. I know you could benefit from this. How do you have that conversation or not have that conversation because it's not the right time? And so really, that's what we want to talk about today is, jokingly how to not be annoying, because we feel like sometimes when we get going and there's anybody in the group that is not part of BLE, they probably are rolling their eyes at us like, oh my gosh, could you guys please talk about something other than the BLE? But I think when you're a food addict and you've obsessed so long about food, finding the answer is a little like finding Jesus. And I'm not trying to downplay anybody who that's their spirituality. Right. That's not what I mean by that. I just mean people can equate that in their mind. It's like when you have that conversion, all you want to do is tell people because
tell everybody.
You think you've you think you found the answer for everybody. And so, I just want to talk about that today. So Bonny.
Yeah, so I definitely think it is for me, I mean, as a physician who has tried to help patients with their weight my whole life, who have struggled with my own weight for my whole life, the fact that I've found something that honestly is so freaking easy and is so successful.
Yeah.
Having never been able to crack that nut before. And just, again, props to Susan Pierce Thompson for putting it together in a way that helped me understand why this works.
Right.
it feels like an actual miracle. I mean, it is like, if you just like figured out how to make manna,
Hallelujah.
how to get manna from heaven, and then everyone else
Right.
is like, I really need manna, and you're like, it's right here,
Right. How to make that happen.
So there's that, and it just makes you want to talk about it. But as we've talked about in previous episodes, you cannot will transformation for someone else. You cannot do it all for them or whatever. The whole thing is you have to get to a point where you're ready to embrace it yourself, or you won't be successful. I mean, if you're just doing it, if you have a partner, we talked about partners the last episode. If you have a partner that's doing BLE and you're just going to kind of go along with for the ride with them, you're just not going to be successful, right? Everybody's got to do this for themselves. So I very much remember, you have a before picture, which you use, which is when we took our hike in Victoria, that I felt so horrible because you were struggling. You were carrying so much weight and you struggled so much.
We all thought I was going to die on that.
Really, like, and I felt horrible that we put you through, the whole thing, right? And I mean, the whole time I'm thinking like, I know this would work for her. I know Meagan's personality. I know when she decides she's going to do something, like she will jam on this, which you have, you know what I mean? But I very clearly understood that if I made you feel forced into it in any way, it would have the opposite effect because we're both strong personalities.
Yeah.
That wasn't the way to do it.
Yeah.
And I just had to resign myself to like, if she asks me about it, I'm going to tell her. And I'm going to stop myself after I answer the question that's asked. I'm not going to go on to a whole sermon on the mount about whatever, right?
All of the, I apologize. This is not meant to be offensive to any Christian out there.
No, I mean, I think for people,
it's the easiest way to relate how you feel.
For people who have had a religious
BLE.
transformation, right?
Yes.
And they feel saved or they feel, whatever, healed.
Yeah.
So I think, I knew that I needed to just live by example and keep my mouth shut and answer a question if you had it and not push because that was not going to work.
Yeah.
And
she had pushed with other things before, I will tell you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, because both of our personalities are that's just who we are.
Because I'm obnoxious.
We're both obnoxious. It's not just you.
I really try to think about that when I'm in a situation where someone asks a question, what are you doing?
Yeah.
I try to, it's really hard for me because I'm just a talker anyway, but I mean, I really try to just answer the question asked.
Right.
And then if they ask more questions, I will answer them. But on top of the fact that number one, even if you think someone really needs this for their health and safety, health and wellness, you're not going to be able to get them to do it just by forcing them to do it. On top of that, on the flip side, some people aren't ready, may never be ready. Yeah. And I don't want to make anyone feel bad about themselves.
Right.
We all have been talking through all these podcasts about our body image and our self-image and our, the struggle we have with how we feel about ourselves and our bodies. And the last thing I would want to do is to make someone else feel like I'm shaming them, like I'm doing the right thing and you're doing the wrong thing. So I try to be really sensitive to that. And I'm sure I don't always get it right, but I think that's really important. Like, and again, it's so hard because you're like, I've got the golden ticket, and actually there's a whole box of golden tickets, and I could give everybody this golden ticket, and it's going to make such a difference in your life. But it's like, you just can't do that.
Yeah.
And I think that comes down to, I think we've talked before about the stages of readiness for change. And I know Bonnie and I had a conversation about, how can we help people get ready to change? It's like, you can't. If that was possible, I'd, have my best-selling book and, nobody would have issues with food addiction, sex addiction, anything. People are going to be, they all have their own moment of readiness when they realize, okay, it's time for me to make a change and I'm in the place where I can do that. And there's no magic to that. There's no, well, if you just do it this way, then that person will be ready to change.
And I think, I get asked a lot of questions through social media about, how I'm doing it. And I always tell people, like, I am not special. Like, I am not a unicorn. There is no magic pill. I just had my crucible moment of like some really crappy labs that scared the pee-wad out of me. And I was like, I got to make a major life change or I'm not going to live. And, I was still trying to live, life at that point, like climbing up a mountain with my two skinny friends. But and I wasn't ready. I was not, even after that experience and watching Bonny eat the way that she, the way that she eats, and my rebel part saying, F you, I'm going to eat whatever I want to eat. And we were on vacation, so I did it up that weekend. You know what I mean? Like, I remember that whole weekend, and I just, I think it's coming to a place on your own, and not, I do think you handled it well, like, because you could have been pushier and you weren't. And so it's something I try and remind myself. Again, like you said, answer the question asked. You don't have to give more information. A lot of people ask, I mean, obviously I've lost almost 110 pounds. So people ask me all the time, like, what are you doing? And the first thing I always is, oh, well, I don't eat sugar and flour. And that normally shuts people down. I mean, I hate to say it like that, but that normally shuts people down super quick. And they're like, oh, wow, okay, that sounds like something I'd never want to do. And then they stop asking questions. And then it's like, if after I say I don't eat sugar and flour, they want to know more information, they'll ask me another question, and I can then go into more information. But I think for me, like, that's kind of how I keep a tag on it, is like, I give that information first. Like, here's the hard information.
You front load it.
I do. I front load it. I'm like, I don't eat sugar and flour. And if people like can stomach that and want to know more, they'll ask. And if they can't, they're going to say, oh, that's good for you.
And usually the first question they ask is, how do you do that? And I usually say something like, it's weird, but after a few weeks of not having it, your cravings for it go down. And that's really one of the main reasons I do it. And then I just leave it at that. I'm like, I like being free of the cravings more than even the weight loss.
People don't ask me how, because I think after this much weight loss, they just assume that, like,
you
I
figured
it out. Right. And they're like, if they're not interested in doing that, making that change for themselves, they stop. Like, they're like, that's what most people who ask me after they hear no sugar, no flour, they're like, nope, I'm done. Thanks.
And I'm glad to hear that you felt like I handled us eating different food well, because I think that's a thing I try to work on. If I'm especially like we were having a girls' weekend and having a fun time, and it's like, if someone's celebrating with food and that's part of their joyous moment, like, do not rain on that parade. And so I even I even try to, like, I've been doing like a lot of like business meals lately, like, with colleagues or travel, and people are talking about their favorite cocktails and getting cocktails, and I'm getting my little sparkly water, and they're like, oh, don't you want it, whatever. And I'm like, oh, I don't do that anymore, which usually shuts them down, because they're like, oh, maybe she's a recovered alcoholic. They don't know.
Right. Absolutely.
But I just say, oh my gosh, but I used to love having a Cosmo, or I love the flavor of that type of whiskey. That's really interesting. Like, I have the ability, I'm detached enough from it, and I'm not triggered by it. If you are, then you just need to not talk about it.
Right.
But I can like chat about, oh my God, that dessert looks delicious. I'm going to live vicariously through you. Oh, that looks wonderful. And so that I'm deliberately doing it to make sure they don't feel a discomfort.
Right.
Like, oh, she doesn't drink, or she doesn't eat this. Maybe I shouldn't eat this in front of her. Maybe it's going to ruin her night.
Right.
Like, they don't need to have all those bad feelings. Right. And so I just make sure to
You're putting them
try
at
to
ease.
say something like, oh my God, that looks amazing. And, whatever. And just let them enjoy it.
On the flip side of that coin, though, Robin, is it our job to worry about what other people are feeling?
It is not our job to worry about what other people are feeling.
I just gave her a softball.
Right. I think there's a beautiful balance, right? Because Bonny, what I hear you saying is you want to put them at ease. Yeah. You eating that thing doesn't bother me.
Yes.
Right. But then there's I am going to choose to eat the way I eat, or I am going to say what I'm going to say about BLE and what it's done for me. And if that makes you uncomfortable, then that's on you.
Right.
And you need to look at your feelings around that.
Right. But again, this episode is how do we balance that?
Yeah.
How do we not be obnoxious? Because I generally tend to be unapologetically who I am. You know what I mean? And I will talk to somebody about this if they want to know information. I will very easily give that information, no problem. But I also just want to be respectful, like you said, of like, you can't, I'm looking at Bonnie, like Bonnie said, is that you cannot force anybody into this. Pushing this on people, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Like it's just not, it's not even a possibility. And I think the other thing is living the example, which is what my hope is for myself, is that, like, if I can live the example, I really want to give people hope that
Yeah.
it's possible.
Yes.
Yes.
And I think that the only way to do that is to not be annoying, because if I'm annoying, then people are not going to be hopeful. They're just going to think I'm preaching at them, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so it's like, how do I balance that of like, here's the information I'm willing to give you. I'm willing to give this out at any possible moment. If you want to know, I'm here to tell you about it. But yet I feel like personally, because of my huge transformation, I don't really have to say a lot of words around the fact that I've made such a big transformation. And so like people they can just see that this works. And so I think the one thing too that I like to make sure when I do posts about my weight loss, I try and include my labs. So people understand that, like, for me, it's not just about the number on the scale. It's about the huge health improvement. I mean, the amazing health improvement that I have made by changing my lifestyle this way. And I think, again, that's where it gets really hard to not, preach the gospel of BLE, because it's like, I know that this works. I know that you can change your life. I know that you can have huge health transformation, weight transformation, and
not be white knuckling it.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I think we talked about this, like, at first detoxing is hard. It's hard to come off anything when you've been using it, especially if food is an addiction, and that it's been your crutch for coping. Finding those other tools it takes some work. It's not easy in the sense of like, there's no work to be done. It's easy in the sense of like, all the pieces are laid before us in this program, which I really appreciate. Again, like I am very thankful that Susan Pierce Thompson wrote this book and put this program together in the way she did, because it does make so much sense. And it is transformational.
Well, and one of the things that you were talking about, especially on that girls' weekend that we did, when you were pre-BLE, right, is that what Bonnie did was modeling, which is what we can do for people that are, maybe outside the window looking in, and I remember when you had, we were all going out to eat one day, and I wasn't like in the BLE, and just being able to watch you eat and watch how you ordered food. And I was like,
I agree.
Oh, that's not that hard. Like, we're still eating at one of our favorite places that we eat, and she's still eating this delicious thing.
Right.
I could do that.
Well,
right?
and the amount of food, I think that too was like, because everything we had done in the past was like
Restrictive.
Very restrictive as far as like the amount of food.
Yeah.
And so I think that was one of the big things that I really saw too. The modeling was like, oh, there's a lot of food there.
Yeah.
And it might not be food I would normally choose, obviously, if we were going out to eat or whatever the case might be. But it's not like you are...
I wasn't eating like a little...
No,
right.
No, and that, I mean, again, like, we can harken back to the juicing,
Right,
it's like,
right.
that was like, oh my gosh, I'm like, why would you ever want to do that
Right.
to yourself, So, sorry, I'm sorry.
No,
I hate
it
to
was-
keep bringing it up.
Yep.
Yeah, it was a phase.
It was a thing.
It was a thing. Yeah. No, and that really was restrictive. And when people say, oh, isn't giving up sugar and flour restrictive? It's like, I eat so much food, and I eat so many different kinds of food.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's restrictive of a couple of things, and then opens up a lot of other things.
Yeah.
Right. And I even think about if I'm eating around people who I think are watching me and thinking and pre-contemplative about
Right.
making a change. I am also very careful about even what substitutions I make, because you guys know I'm on maintenance, and I have some, like we talked about, like I add cocoa powder to milk sometimes or whatever. I have some things that are part of my plan, that are planned, that I allow, but I will be very careful about not even adding those in, because I don't want to role model sloppiness or whatever when I'm around people who are in a fragile state of pre-contemplation or whatever, just because, again, I want them to see, like, this is how you would eat if you're going to do this plan and be successful, right?
Yeah. I think we're all, those of us that are doing this program are, we're ambassadors for the program, because people look at us and they have questions, especially when you've had tremendous success. It's like, well, what are you doing? And what is it? So I think that that's another thing to think about is, give people information as they ask. Again, answering the question.
Just the question
Just
asked.
the question asked. But being available to people too, because what we've talked about, like in the I think it was episode 3 was the crucible moment when we talked about, where people are in that decision-making process. It's very likely, like I did with Bonnie and I's, relationship with this, is that eventually I came back and was like, okay, I'm ready to do this.
Now,
Like,
you're like, okay, I got the labs, now I need to
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Where like I have had a few people I've interacted with, and you'll hear this is like, well, how are you doing it? And it's like, well, here's how I'm doing it. And like, oh, well, I don't need to do that because I know what I need to eat. So I'm just
Yeah.
going to do the Ozempic.
Yeah.
I just need to eat less of, I know what and it's like, you can't just launch into this, well, it's not about knowing what you need to eat, it's about food addiction, it's about,
Right.
it's
Right.
not the moment. They're
Nope.
not in that moment, right?
Nope.
They're not anywhere near being
Yeah.
okay with that.
No.
You just continue to role model, let them go do their other thing. And
Right.
if that works for them, great.
Yes.
And if it doesn't, and there's some reason that drives them to come back, they will come find you and
Yeah.
say, oh, tell me again about that, I need to do it,
Yeah.
right?
And you know, it's funny because there's someone recently, and somebody I'm connected with on social media that was like, I've tried other things and I flirted with BLE and I realized BLE is it. Like
Yeah.
I need to come back here. I know that this is a thing. And
Yeah.
you know, so the thing is that it's not my job. And this goes back to, you know, last episode we were talking about, it's not my job to push anybody else on this, to police anybody else's program, to get them to the finish line. What my job is to be available. I mean, and again, like you don't have to be available if you don't want to answer questions, just tell people none your business. You know what I mean? Like it's really not your job to do this if you don't want to, but if you're like us, obviously we feel the need to spread the message. If we can do that, if people are willing to listen, you know, you just need to be available for people's questions at wherever they're at. And whether that's you know, I'm just kind of interested in what you're doing, or no, like I'm having a crisis moment. Like I was having, like, I know I need to make a major life change. Like, what does that look like? So any other thoughts around how to not be annoying? And if you find this episode annoying, I'm sorry.
No, we're not sorry.
Yeah, sorry, not sorry.
Yeah,
Really.
I think we view this, I think I can speak for all of us, that we view this as a service that
Yeah.
we want to do.
Yeah.
We're so grateful that we have been provided with this information and the help that we just really want to share it with other people,
Yeah.
just for the purpose of, if it can change, you know, one person's outlook on things and
Yep.
help them succeed at this and be a healthy person. All of this effort is worth it if one single person
Yeah.
gets the information they need to get healthier. And so
Yeah.
I think if you take it in that spirit as you go through recovery, and again, don't feel like you have to, you're not responsible for fixing people.
Yeah.
And also, you don't need to, that pushing it on them is not going to help. You know what I mean? That just be a resource and be, you know, true to yourself and be a good example.
Yeah.
And share information that's requested.
Yeah. Yep. Lead with love. That's what I say.
I like it.
Yep. Well, it has come to the end of our episode, and I'm going to solicit questions. Or if you want to ask us questions, please feel free to reach out via our email, which is onthebrightlinepodcast@gmail.com, or one of our social media outlets, DM, whatever. And please, we'd love to answer your questions here on the podcast, and love to hear your input. So thank you all for listening. We'll talk to you next time.